Yeah, so on the delta math, there are 10, compare and order rational numbers. So this part of it is just telling which number is bigger. So comparing fractions and decimals, telling which one's bigger, which one's smaller, comparing also with negative numbers. Okay, so the first part, I want everybody to draw a number line on their paper and number it -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So draw that in your notebook. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, draw a number line in your notebook. Okay, now when we're looking at this, when you're looking at a number line, we start down at the lower end. These are the smaller numbers, all the way up to this side where they get bigger. Everybody agree with that? Smaller to bigger. The negative numbers, the more negative it is, the smaller it is. -2 is smaller than -1. Obviously, 2 is bigger, and we could keep going. But the point here is I want you to add some other numbers in here, okay? I have some lines in the middle of here. So we're going to start at 0, and we're going to just look at this part between 0 and 1. This line right in the middle between 0 and 1 would be what decimal? Do we know? Go ahead.
0.5.
0.5. And the fraction would be 1/2. Okay, so 1/2, 0.5, that's halfways between 0 and 1. What would this one then be? Halfways between 0.5 and 0. This line right here, what would that be? We know what decimal that is or what fraction that is? Jada? 0.4. But if we go halfways, it's about 1/4, so 0.25 or 1/4. Okay. Right here would be 3/4 or 0.75. Okay, do those fractions and decimals look familiar to you? Hopefully we all recognize that 0.75 is getting a little closer to 1 and it's getting bigger. Now when we flip that to the negative, everything is kind of reflected. Okay, so the first line on the other side of 0 is going to be -1/4 and -0.25. Okay, -0.25 is going to be a little bit bigger than -0.5 or -1/2. Okay, so writing this down so you have these examples to look at. And then the next line would be -0.75 and -3/4. Okay, so those two sets of fractions and decimals are just reflections of each other. Okay, so I'm gonna color this one green. Can anybody tell me what fraction or decimal that green line would be? It's between -1 and -2. I saw somebody put -0.5, but we have to be careful because it's between -1 and -2, it's -1.5. Oh, yep, Ben put it in. Or -1.5. Okay. Okay, if we go all the way to the opposite end, way up here, this green line, would be 1.5 or 1 1/2. Okay, so where do you think on this number line I would put the decimal negative 0.6? Between which two that I already have up there? Where should I put negative 0.6? Jada?
To the left.
Further to the left of what?
1.5. Negative.
And actually, because it's 0.6, it's going to be right here. Okay, this is negative 0.6. Okay, it's between negative 0.5 and negative 0.75. Right in kind of close to the middle there. So we have to think about where these fractions would fall if we're putting them in order or if we're comparing them. What's bigger? Negative 0.5 or negative 0.75? What's the bigger fraction? Which is bigger, negative 0.5 or negative 0.75? What do you think? Those of you at home, you can type it in the chat. Which is bigger, negative 0.5 or negative 0.75? This one here or this one here? Oops. What's the bigger number? I'm seeing a few people put in negative 0.5. Can anybody tell me why negative 0.5 is bigger than negative 0.75? Because it's closer to where? Go ahead, Brooke.
0.
Closer to 0. When we're negative, the closer we get to 0, the bigger it is. Okay? If you're positive, the further from 0, the bigger it is. So what's bigger? Negative 1 1/2 or 1 1/2? Which is bigger? Negative 1 1/2 or positive 1 1/2? Travis.
1 1/2.
The 1 1/2. Positive is always bigger than the negative. Agreed with that? What's bigger, negative 2 or negative 1 1/2? Travis.
Negative 1 1/2.
Negative 1 1/2 is bigger than negative 2. Okay, because it's closer to 0. As we move up the number line, the numbers keep getting bigger. Okay? So part of your homework is going to be comparing fractions. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this. One way is by finding a common denominator. Okay, so I could take the fractions 5/8 and 7/12 and find a common denominator and compare them. Now, some of you might be able to look at 5/8 and 7/12 and know which one's bigger. I can't. In my mind, I can't visually see that. Okay? So I need to find a common denominator, and a common denominator in this case could be 24. 8 times 3 is 24. 12 times 2 is 24. Okay, so I could rewrite them. Now I can't leave the top numbers the same. If I change the bottom number of a fraction, I have to change the top number. If I multiply the bottom number by 3, I have to multiply the top number by 3, so that would be 15. 12 times 2, so 7 times 2 is 14. Which is bigger, 15 24ths or 14 24ths? Which one's the bigger fraction? Which is bigger, 15 or 14? 15. So that's the bigger fraction. Okay? That's one way to do it. I have an easier way. Can I show you an easier way? Yeah. So some of you remember this from previous years. If I give you these fractions, 5/8 and 7/12, some of you will remember doing this. And you just multiply them. Okay? So 8 times 7 is what? 56. And 12 times 5 is 60. Whichever number is bigger is the bigger fraction. Did you guys know that when you do that, you're actually finding a common denominator? Did you know that? Okay, I like all these little tricks, and this is a nice trick, but if you don't know why it works, then it's kind of not, like, you shouldn't do it, right? Because you have to know why. Okay, here's why it works. 8 times 12 is 96. You're really finding a common denominator of 96. Because 8 times 12 is 96, 5 times 12 is 60. I need to get these people back in the meeting who accidentally popped out. There. Okay. And 12 times 8 is 96, and 7 times 8 is 56. So when you do that cross product thing, you're actually finding a common denominator. You're just only writing the numerators down. You're writing the 60 and the 56. Well, 60 is bigger than 56, so 5/8 is bigger than 7/12. Are we okay with that? Okay, so I'm okay with you doing that cross products. You just gotta know why it works. Okay? You're really finding a common denominator. Okay, so on your homework, you're gonna see a few problems that look like this, where it says to compare, and you're supposed to write less than, greater than, or equal to. Okay, so I want you to put these problems in your notes. Let's start, I'm gonna cover up the other one. Let's start with number 1. 3/4 and 5/6. Which is the bigger fraction? Those of you at home, I want you to type into the chat either less than, greater than, or equal, depending on what you get as an answer. Those of you here, I want you to try this problem. And you can just do your cross products. Okay, so I'm seeing a number of answers come in that 5/6 is the bigger number, so you would have put a less than sign. You guys agree with that? 3/4 is less than 5/6. If I did 3/4 and 5/6, and I did my cross products like this, you always have to go from the bottom to the top though. Can't go the other direction. 4 times 5 is 20. 6 times 3 is 18. Well, 20 is bigger than 18. So this side is the bigger fraction. Okay. Now I will caution you to be really careful with fractions that have negatives. Okay, when you look at number 2, these are both negative. Okay, when you see a negative sign in front of a fraction, I want you to rewrite it this way. -2/3. Just put the negative sign on the top number. Okay? And -4/5. So the negative sign can always go with the top number. Okay? Then, if we do our cross products, which is really finding a common denominator, we'd have 5 times -2 on the left-hand side is -10. And on the right-hand side, 3 times -4 is -12. Here's where you have to be careful. What's bigger, -10 or -12? Travis?
-2.
-10 is the bigger number. So -2/3 is bigger than -4/5. Okay, remember they're negative, so -2/3 is closer to 0. Everybody agree with that? We okay with that? So be careful with negatives. Now you're also going to see some problems that have decimals. Or have whole numbers in front of them. Okay, so if we're comparing fractions and decimals, just make it decimals, you guys. Change it into a decimal and then compare them. So I have -6/10. I'm going to put the negative sign with the top number. And we can use our calculator and do 6 divided by 10. So that's -0.6. Now we have to be careful because these are negative. What's bigger, -0.6 or -0.5? 5, right? It's closer to 0 because they're negative. So I would put a less than sign in there. Okay. If we look at 5 2/9 and 5 2/7, does the whole number in front matter? Does the 5 matter? Not really. Okay, so you guys, in this problem, because it's a 5 and a 5, I can ignore the 5s. I'm really comparing the 2/9 and the 2/7. What is bigger, 2/9 or 2/7? If you were to eat 2/9 of a pizza or 2/7 of a pizza, which did you eat more of? 2/7, right? These pieces are bigger. If you only cut a pizza into 7 pieces versus 9 pieces. You could do your cross products. 14, this one would be 18. 18 is bigger. So, with the whole numbers there, 5 2/7 is a little bit bigger than 5 2/9. Now, if they were negative, then it would be the opposite. If I put negative signs on both of these, okay, recognize this. When you put negative signs on there, then it just becomes the exact opposite of what it was when it was positive. Okay, so if you're confused, think of them as positives and then flip it when they're negative. These weren't, they were positive, so we'll leave it like that. Okay, -2/5 and -0.44. Use your calculator. Let's change -2/5 to a decimal first. So we would do 2 divided by 5, which is -0.4. Okay, you guys, I don't like, it confuses me sometimes when decimals don't have the same number of decimal places. So I'm going to put a 0 behind this 4. Because then I can remove the decimal and just think of it as -40 and -44. Which is the bigger number, -40 or -44? Really? -40. So -0.4 is bigger than -0.44. Okay? And again, I will put all these notes on Canvas so you can look back at them if needed. All right, the last thing is to put numbers in order from least to greatest, or greatest to least, depending on what they ask. I think some of these should be easy. Can you look at this list and tell me what's the lowest number up there? By just looking at it, can you tell? And sometimes it's easier to write everything in the same form. If everything was decimals and we got rid of this fraction, that might help. 14 divided by 4, this fraction is 3.5, or the decimal for that fraction is 3.5. So we have 3.5, -3.4, 6.0, and -2.5. What's the lowest number up there? Go ahead. -2.5? Careful. They're negative, right? The further away from 0, really? So the -3.4 is the lowest number. Okay, so I've used that one. And cross that one off. Of what's left, now it should be really easy to pick out which one's lowest of the ones that are left, because there's only one negative left. So that would be negative 2.5. What's lower, 3.5 or 6.0? 3.5. I'm going to write it back in the original form. So 14 over 4. And then finally, this one's done. The last one is 6.0. So this would be in order from least to greatest. Questions there? So on the homework, you're going to have to pick greater than, less than, or equal to, and then put some things in order. Okay? Any questions from anybody at home?